Arsene, how is retirement suiting you?
I don't like the word. I don't feel retired at all, but it is, I feel frustrated from competition, you know, and I'm basically a competitor. And what I miss, I think honestly many things I don't miss at all.
What?
But all that stuff around the game nowadays that you have to deal with. But of course the day, the competition, the achievement that you can do together, sharing emotions, sharing competition, and ups and downs with others. Of course you miss that because I spent my life in that.
Arsene, do you remember what it was like the first day you woke up and you weren't going to training?
I remember very well.
What was it like?
It was a bit lost.
Yeah, because I remember mine, it was terrible.
I was a bit lost because you wonder, suddenly you have time in front of you,
Yeah.
and what was never the case before. You have always a problem to sort out. When you have sorted one out, there's another one coming straight away. And suddenly you have not that in front of you. And as well, the next game is always a target in your life, you know, and you must have experienced that as well. It's very difficult, but as well, I took it as well as a challenge. And I have maybe as well one quality: I don't like to look back. I look always to look in front, and I always try to think, where is my next level now? What do I do, and how well can I do it?
Do you feel energized?
I must say honestly, I felt that I needed a rest physically. You know, it helped me. For a while, I couldn't rest well, but after I went to the World Cup, and at the World Cup I was quite busy with football because I went 5 times to Moscow and back to Paris. And after the World Cup, you know, usually I started straight away the next season. So that's where the wall was in front of me.
See, I phrased my question, Arsene, with a sense of irony because plainly you're not finished, are you?
No, because but the problem is people want you to put you always in cases, you know, retired or finished or you know that when you age a little bit, people want to finish you completely.
Yes.
I think as long as you have appetite for life, you want to be useful and do something that is useful. And as well, I believe that the big advantage we have, or I have from my experience, 35 years without stopping in the game, is sharing what I know with other people. And I think if you don't do that, life is a bit useless, you know. If what you have accumulated you cannot share with anybody, or at least try to give some of it to other people, I think all you've done looks a bit useless, because you should not leave this world without having at least tried to give something to other people. And I believe as well, when I look at my life, I had one quality. I had the capacity to listen to people who have been there before me.
When you, and I'll say when you come back into this game, will it be as a number one? You say you want to impart your wisdom and what you've accumulated, what you've learned.
It can be
you could do that by being
in different ways. It can be straight away as a responsible for the result of the next game, you know. It can be as well in managing a club from a little bit behind the manager. It can be as well as a technical responsibilities in world football with an international company. So it can be in different ways. But I believe that I spent my life, day and night, trying to have a concept about what this game is about. And I would not like just to live in my garden now and think about that.
When you went to Arsenal, you had the time in your life to engage in what you described as a project.
Yes.
That's different now. So do you have to inherit something that's already started and just needs a sprinkle of stardust?
Well, you were in England when I arrived in England, and I believe that a manager basically has an influence at 3 different levels. One, on result, and the style of play of his team. 2, on the individual career of a player, because some do not do well, but they develop players, you know, and 3, on the impulse and the development you can give to a football club. I must say, my luck when I arrived in England, all the 3 were possible. Because the Premier League, you know, was at the start, basically, of an era of development. So I could as well contribute to the part number 3. What is interesting as well, and what helped me as well to develop as a manager is how can I make this club bigger dimension. This is less possible now, you know. Today, the manager is a guy who tries to win the next result, who tries to get the player to play well. But another thing has changed since we have started together in this Premier League, is that when I arrived, the players were happy to play for their club. They wanted, of course, the best possible contract, but if they got the best possible contract, they're happy to play for their club. When they didn't do well, they felt guilty. We will win next game. We are Arsenal, you know. And slowly, over the years, that responsibility has a bit changed. Is today, the club is responsible towards the player. And if the player doesn't do well, the club feels guilty today for not doing enough for the player. It's not obvious, but when you think about, when you look at the distance, that has changed. And so overall, today the club, when the player doesn't play well, the club is always to do more. We have to give more. We have to create something more.
Let me ask you then, Arsene, when you arrived, the clubs pretty much had the power over the player, yes?
Yeah, yeah.
Do the players now have too much power over the clubs?
Too much, I don't know, but they have much more, and nobody would dispute that. And I would say even when you think that today the big players, the massive players, are basically a club inside the club. Why? Because they have their own social responsible network responsible. They have their own physio sometimes. They have their own fitness coach. They have there's a club structure
So
within
can I
the
just
club.
add, you missed 2 out there. DJ, rapper, and chef usually.
I'm not a specialist in that. I don't know a lot about that. But what I mean, of course, now the power of a player and is worldwide. And there's still a separation of the local fan base and the worldwide fan base. The worldwide fan base has become a little bit individual. That means, for example, when Ronaldo goes from Real Madrid to Juventus, you have his fans move with him
about that.
to
Yes,
Juventus.
absolutely.
You know, so the international fan base is more a stardom fan base. The local fan base, in what we know in England, is still similar.
When you arrived, and you arrived at Arsenal, you could motivate your players, yeah?
Yeah.
I think you would find you can do that.
I tried.
How much more difficult is it to motivate multi-millionaires?
Well, you have to be certainly more convincing.
Yes.
It's more horizontal than, and it was more vertical
Yes.
before, and it has become more horizontal now. That means you have to treat the players like millionaires. That means you have to convince them. They're better informed as well. They have their own advice around them as well, and so the society has changed. I believe that overall the players have become more professional, that football has become better. The psychological context has become a little bit more complicated, and the environment of the clubs as well itself has become more complicated because everybody has an opinion. This opinion is spread worldwide straight away. You have a judgment before the game when you have picked the team, during the game and after the game, you know, and so the resistance to stress, the demand of strength of people who are responsible is certainly higher, has become higher in the last 20 years, yes.
So how different was half-time when you started to the last one that you sat in charge of?
I must say, today we live in the world of artificial intelligence, you know, and that you're flooded with information at halftime, what was not the case. Sometimes you flooded your dressing room with your emotions at halftime. Today, you have first to meet all the scientists who sit in the stand to collect the data, you know, and see that, sort out what is important. And the modern manager is basically a guy who has to trust his feeling, but as well a guy who has to select 3, 4 important things that can get him to help. He gets 100, but he must choose the 3 or 4 important things that can help him to be a bit more efficient in the second half. But as well, I said many times, you know, you could imagine that the next chairman who decided that the social networks can make a change in the second half.
I've seen you mention that, yes. Do you really think we're going that way?
That will become more and more influential.
No, surely not, Arsene.
It will happen.
What would you do then if social media came to you at halftime and said, you've got to change
I personally would not accept it, but I'm a bit from the old school on that front, you know.
Exactly.
But you're convinced that we're going in that direction?
We're going in that direction, of course. If you imagine that the power of the social networks, what is even worse, it's not the majority, it's a minority who is the most extreme, you know. But it's a bit like the problem that democracy has. It's a little bit dictatorship of the minorities, and that is the same on social networks.
So are you saying the era of your eyes, and I've always believed watching football, your eyes are the best judge. Is that gone?
Not for me.
Good.
Not for me, because I feel there's something that we call basically intuition, is the impression that overall gets into us. Why? Because we grew up at 3 or 4 years of age. We heard all the people talking about the game. That gets into us, and slowly we have our own opinion, our own way to see football, and that is for me still the most important. But you can as well imagine that in 20 years a robot will sit in front of you, and I hope you will still sit there, but you might have a robot in front of you.
There'll be 2 robots sitting here.
Tell me, yes or no to this one. Is it true that you used to take defeat so badly in your early career you stopped a team bus so that you could vomit?
Yes.
Do you still take defeat badly?
Very badly. I must say that's something that I noticed over life, and I would say I reproach myself. Why cannot live a bit better with losing?
You shouldn't. I love that. See, don't ever reproach yourself. That's what makes you a winner.
And that is the consistent during my career. I must say, yes, I did vomit. I did sometimes when we had a winter break and we lost before the winter break, not come out of my home for 3 days. You know, it is. At the end of the day, I wonder, are you crazy or not? Because it's a sacrifice of your life, basically, you know. And but that's how it is. That's how my personality is.
Let's go back to the moment that you said the realization came that you weren't going to Arsenal on that Monday morning, whenever that was recently. What did you do? What do you do when you're not thinking about football? And how much space is there for that to be?
I read sport, listen to sport. I read science. I try to get informed.
What science? What science do you like?
Sport science.
Okay.
I like politics as well. I like to know where the world goes, how is the evolution of our society.
You never thought about standing for president in France?
Got a chance.
Seriously?
No,
got a chance.
I think I'm conscious of my limitations, you know.
I think you might be very good.
Yeah.
But you enjoy the political scene.
I enjoy it. I love it. Yes, because I would say as well when we speak about sharing, and I would like to know as well that the society, the world, humanity gets always better. You know, we are lucky not to have known war in our life.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
the first time for many generations. When I think that we look at the number of people who have sacrificed their life basically for stupidities. You know, at 20 years of age. We are the first generations who had only to fight in football. That's not bad. We were lucky.
You say you don't look back. Well, let's have a little look back just for a moment. Everything you did when you arrived in England, you're the guy that was is credited with changing everything in terms of preparation. Yes? Diet. Did you expect to find the game in the place that it is now when you started to preach to people like Ray Parlour, Tony Adams, Martin Keown and others that life had got to change?
You know, all these guys were my luck. First of all, they were better players than I thought.
Were they?
Yes, when I arrived.
They must have been. You kept them in.
And all around 30. When I arrived, I had 9 players with 30 or over 30. And it was coincided as well. They were all intelligent. They had as well all character, what you call character in England.
Character, absolutely.
We go on Tuesday night to Sheffield United, don't worry, we'll be there. That was the time where you had to behave like that. But as well, it was the time that coincided with the influx of television money. And all these players, they moved basically from 200,000 to 1 million in 6 months, or in a year. So every year more for them was fantastic, 1 year more was for them 4 years before. Ian Wright, when I arrived, was on 250,000, per year. That shows you and he was the star of the team. So in 1 year he moved to 1 million or 1.2. So for them 1 year more. So they were ready for the change. If it could then give them 1 more year or 2 more years. So most of them played until 34, 35. So they made, that has changed. If you look back, if you force me to look back, these players made their money between 30 and 35. After we moved from 25 to 30, after from 20 to 25, and today we are in England from 16 to 20. They make more money. You would be absolutely amazed when you see the amount of money that a good 17-year-old player is making.
We
now
wouldn't
in
be.
England.
Do you believe that money, and much as it's enhanced the game and made it better and allowed us to see more and more top players in England, do you believe ultimately it could destroy football?
Look, it depends at what age you get it. It depends who gets it, and what is for sure, it has to coincide with performance. And today, the big problem, the structure of the contracts is inflationists. To keep the value of a player, you have to extend his contract. To extend the contract, you have always to give more. So the structure of the whole way we pay players is creating inflation. But as well, to come back to what you said, I think it can kill the hunger index.
Right, get it.
I try always to think how hungry you are in life. There are some people, the really deep, top level, competitive people are not motivated by money. Why should Federer or Nadal or Djokovic win every year? Because there's something more in there. But for the players who are just motivated by external rewards like money, yes, it can kill them. But especially if they are not well, they have not a good environment.
Let's stay vaguely in this era. Was it a conscious decision to turn away from the Vieiras and the Petits to smaller, tricky players? And if it was, why?
It was not a conscious decision unfortunately, to find a Vieira who can play football like a small player. Since I'm in England, everybody said, I found the new Vieira, but
still looking.
20 years have passed and nobody found him, And Petit was the same. But it was as well a little coincidence that we got Fabregas. He was not tall, but he was still a great football player. So I replaced Vieira with Fabregas and Gilberto Silva, who worked as well hard for the team, because Gilberto Silva Vieira was as well a fantastic pair, and they were the invincibles. And after that came the problem when we built the stadium. We had to sell our best players.
Andy and I sat in not dissimilar circumstances to these once with Bob Wilson, character that you know very well, former Arsenal goalkeeper. He was your goalkeeping coach.
Yes.
We were discussing you, inevitably. I think it was the time, the general feeling was you were struggling to find a goalkeeper to replace David Seaman and Jens Lehmann with, and you had one or two in and out. And I said to Bob, does he take advice? Does he listen? And Bob said, oh, he listens. And then he does exactly what he wants.
Is that fair?
Is that still the case?
Well, yes. My family say I'm stubborn. Maybe, yes. I try honestly to listen, but at the end of the day, as we spoke before, you need to have your own gut feeling, and sometimes you listen as well to people when you're wrong. You're even more disappointed and more angry because you didn't listen to yourself. And as well in this job, you need at some stage to do what you feel is right.
Does that make leadership lonely?
Yes, very lonely. It's a lonely job. And many people ask me always, you know, the team I inherited when I arrived '96, the Bold, Adams, Dixon, Winterburn, we had Platt, Merson. They're all intelligent enough to be manager. But do you want to sacrifice your life? That's the question, you know. And that is all. This is a job that goes into your brain and never goes out. And if you don't mind, of course, it's fantastic. But sometimes players who have played for 20 years, gone from hotel to hotel, they do not want to start it again. But that's what it is about.
You believe it is a total sacrifice to be successful?
Yeah, total sacrifice. And the interesting thing of my position now is to observe the managers. First of all, but they make as well mistakes, you know, what I didn't always see when I was involved myself and made my own mistakes. But as well to see how much they suffer, you know, and how much they try to not to show it. They try to deal with it and you know, I know in what state they go home after, even when they don't show how disappointed they are and how angry they are.
Do you think it's too much for a manager? I mean, the focus on mistakes and errors, on team selection, on every part of your job now, it's analysed to the nth degree from everybody.
Yeah,
is it too much?
It is too much if you cannot take, for young people, I would say, if you cannot take a distance in the big clubs, it's a bit too much, you know. It's interesting, in fact, to look at the history of English football because basically until the Second World War, the guy stayed 20 years, 15 years as manager. They came in their suit and they watched the game. And after the Second World War, we had the first instability. And now the pressure comes quicker and quicker on the manager. And that's why when you lose 2 games today, on game number 3, you're on the spot, you know, and that's what is absolutely difficult.
What gives you the most satisfaction when you look back?
I would say that I worked with my basic values that I learned in my village my whole life, didn't compromise from that, and I knew when I was on that road, straight, honest, give your best for your club. I accept that I made mistakes, I accept that I made wrong decisions, but what made me proud, I worked with complete commitment and honesty for my club, you know, and I was ready really to give everything for that. That at the end of the day is that you work with your values. You start your life with that and you finish your life with that.
If you haven't any more questions, I have 2. I mentioned on Twitter yesterday that we were going to sit down in a situation like this, and I asked, if you got the opportunity, what would be the question you would most like to put to Arsene Wenger? Now, there were many, but the one that came up more often than not was, did you ever manage to zip that coat up?
Yes, in fact, I improved in that.
Were you conscious of the battle you used to have with it?
Yes, I was conscious of that because they are too long and sometimes the zip didn't work and I struggled a lot with that. But in the end, because people were showing it, I was conscious that I was under scrutiny when I
It became that bad.
It was almost a pre-match ritual. Will Arsene get the coat?
And a last question, and I think you'll appreciate where this one has come from. I don't wish for this for a moment to sound morbid, but what are you going to do when you get to heaven?
I will ask God, where are the referees?
Arsene Wenger, it's been our pleasure.
Thank you very
very
much.
much for your
Thank you,
time.
Arsene.
Thank you.
Thoroughly enjoyed
I
it.
shared the pleasure.
You're too kind.